He guarded the frontier for his country alone, with his strength against thousands of troops, standing on the sands like an unshakable barrier. In the middle of winter, the snow-capped peaks were drenched in blood. The corpses were strewn with bones. The blood had solidified into ice, and the air was filled with dead silence and cold. Under the crimson sky, the cold wind howled angrily, tearing the lapels of the clothes, and the piercing coldness penetrated the skin, as if even the soul was frozen. This war has been more than half a month. The border of China, the lonely figure always stands, as if a flag, an impenetrable confinement, although the enemy thousands dare to die a person. Before him, 1,000 armies had long since been annihilated, and now the only ones standing before him were the few remaining enemies, struggling for their lives and hanging on by a thread. Lin Feng, you really deserve the word supreme. But today, you're destined to die under our Simon's 7 sons. But I've never understood why, when you could have looked for reinforcements, you took on the enemy alone. In the wind, the corners of Lin Feng's mouth rose slightly, his eyes cold. Why do you want to face the battle alone? Because Lin Feng alone is enough. Mr. Lin Feng has been guarding the border for 6 years and has killed countless enemies. If I want to leave, I will guard my home country. If I want to leave, I will suppress the national prestige. If I want to leave, I will recreate the legend of a single man holding back 10,000 troops. You are all too weak, so weak that an offense of 10,000 people cannot shake my Manhwa even a little bit. Today, none of you will leave. I blame you for being a stumbling block on my way home. This battle is doomed. The country is at peace, the family is stable. Lin Feng's arm shook as blood rained down and dispersed with the wind. His physical strength had been depleted. But at the moment he was about to fall, his daughter's quiet, sleeping face repeatedly appeared in his mind, which was the deepest concern of his heart. She was 3 years old, and he had not done his duty as a father. His daughter urgently needed a bone marrow transplant, and 2 years had gone by in a heartbeat. Binhai City Sunshine District, beside the swing set, a 5-year-old girl was swinging, smiling as she did so. Her eyes looked over to the man sitting in a wheelchair not far away, and she said softly, "Daddy, is Xener swinging high?" "Dad, yesterday the kindergarten had a parent-teacher conference, and the teacher asked me why my dad didn't come. I said that my dad was a hero and now he was injured and couldn't move." As Xener said this, the swing gradually stopped. Her dull, lifeless eyes were deep and empty. Ever since she had recovered from her great illness, her father had become what he was today. She was 5 years old and had never heard her father's voice. All she knows is that if her father had not saved her 2 years ago, she would have been long gone from this world. "Yo, little feral, crying here again?" A chubby boy rushed over, yelling. "Zhou Xiaohu, I'm not a bastard." Xiner shouted violently. "If you insult my mom and dad again, I'll beat you up." The voice was like a sharp blade that pierced the air. When Zhou Xiaohu heard this, he became furious and pushed Xiner to the ground, laughing recklessly. Poor Xiner fell on the hard ground and hit the frame of the swing, causing her to burst into tears. "Bah! Try moving again, and I'll gouge your eyes out." Zhou Xiaohu glared at her viciously, his voice carrying obvious provocation. "If I say you're a wild seed, you're a wild seed." Hearing this, Xiner gritted her teeth, and with barely a moment's hesitation, she directly pounced on Zhou Xiaohu's arm, biting down hard on it, her teeth sinking deep into the flesh. Just then, a furious woman walked over at a brisk pace, none other than Zhou Xiaohu's mother. "Bastard looking for death?" The woman kicked Xiner away, her eyes filled with disgust and contempt. What a wild seed, simply uneducated. Although Xiner's body was thin and weak and she was unable to resist, her gaze was locked onto Zhou Xiaohu, determination flashing in her eyes. "Yo, what's that look in your eye? Kneel down for me. Apologize to my little tiger." The woman ferociously picked up Xiner and viciously dragged her to her son. Standing in front of Zhou Xiaohu, she forcefully forced Xiner to kneel on the ground, as if forcing her to admit her fault. Just then, Lin Feng, who had been in a coma for 2 years, finally slowly opened his eyes. "My Lin Feng's daughter is one you dare to touch?" His voice was as low as thunder, filled with overwhelming majesty. The man in the wheelchair stood up violently and violently grabbed the woman's neck, his eyes bursting with intense anger. His tone was like ice. "My Lin Feng's daughter, is that something you dare to insult?" With a hard twist of his wrist, he violently slammed the woman to the ground. Immediately after that, punch after punch, smashing her without the ability to fight back. Seeing this, the woman next to him rushed forward in fear and tried to stop it. But just as she pounced in front of her, she was slapped away by Lin Feng and fell heavily on the ground, rolling several times. "You bastard, how dare you hit someone? Do you believe I'll call the police?" The woman covered her face and screamed, completely losing her mind. "I didn't want to hit a woman in the first place." Lin Feng looked at her coldly, without the slightest bit of pity in his eyes. "This slap, I'm returning it to you on behalf of my daughter. Remember, if you dare to bully my daughter today, I'll spare your lives and you can show off for the rest of your lives." At this time, Xaner had already wiped away her tears. Her hands tightly embraced Lin Feng's legs, and she tilted her head back to look at that familiar face. Dependence and trust flashed in her eyes as she softly called out, "Dad!" Lin Feng lowered his head, his eyes filled with tenderness and endless favor. "Xaner, come, Daddy, hug." Lin Feng picked up Xaner and coldly walked toward Zhou Xiaohu's family, his voice as cold as ice. "Kowtow and apologize 100 times a person, one time less? I'll kill your whole family." Just now also arrogant and domineering Zhou family members at this moment as if plunged into the ice cellar, trembling, bowed his head and constantly kowtowed, his mouth crying. "I'm sorry, we are wrong. We were wrong." However, Xaner could no longer control the aggression in her heart and cried and shouted, "Daddy is bad. I hate Daddy. Mommy hates Daddy. We all hate Daddy. I said that Dad is a hero. But Dad, no one believes." She was in tears, her voice breaking. Lin Feng held her tightly in his arms. A warm strength passed from his palm to her. But he himself could not help but dry cough a few times, and the taste of blood vaguely rose in his throat. His body was still weak, and he had just awakened but was barely holding on. If he did not come to his senses at the end of his strength, would not Xaner continue to be humiliated? Xaner, who was lying in his arms, sensed that something was wrong with her father and hurriedly raised her head, asking worriedly, "Daddy, are you not feeling well? You put me down." Lin Feng gently put her down and said gently, "Xaner, let's go home and find Mom." Kirsener lowered her head, a few points of aggression and incomprehension in her tone. "Daddy, Grandma said that Mommy had to talk to Uncle Sun about something this afternoon and wouldn't let us go home." Lin Feng frowned slightly, his eyes instantly turning cold. "Uncle Sun? What kind of things did they talk about? Why did you purposely sidetrack me and Xaner?" Just as he was about to pursue the question, Xaner suddenly seemed to have thought of something, pulled tightly on his sleeve, and whispered in his ear, "Dad, you still have to pretend you're not awake, and I'll push you along, so you must listen to Xaner." Lin Feng nodded, his voice low. "Okay, I'll listen to Xaner." He then got into a wheelchair and pretended to be unconscious. As soon as the words left her mouth, Xaner let out a loud cry, crying as she shouted, "Daddy, what happened to you? You just woke up and you've been beaten like this, you can't move. I want to find the police, uncle. They beat you into a vegetable. I want the police, uncle, to arrest them." She cried out, trying to push the wheelchair, doing her best to bring Lin Feng home. The moment I walked into the courtyard, there stood at the door a woman with her hands clasped over her chest and a cold face, none other than Li Chueying. Her gaze was like a knife, coldly sweeping over the father and daughter. "Damn girl, didn't I say not to come back? How dare you bring him back, really uneducated? Do you not understand human language?" Xaner shivered at her tone and whispered, "Grandma, Daddy and I are tired. We want to go home and rest." "Shut up." Li Chueying angrily took a few steps forward, grabbing a chicken feather duster in her hand, her eyes cold, her tone full of impatience and disgust. "From now on, you're not allowed to call this punk of a father. Do you hear me?" Xaner froze, her eyes full of doubt, looking up at her grandmother, her voice tinged with disbelief. "But he is Xaner's father, ah." Her eyes unconsciously swept towards the chicken feather duster in Li Chueying's hand, and her body subconsciously shrunk back. Just when the atmosphere was stagnant and oppressive, a man's voice came from inside the room, low and calm. "Xinu, it is my honor to spend the rest of my life with you." As the words fell, a man in a suit and gold-rimmed glasses walked out of the room with an elegant demeanor and gentle demeanor. His pace was unhurried, as if each step had been well thought out, making him impossible to ignore. Xaner whispered, a hint of uneasiness in her voice, "Dad, he's that Uncle Sunday." Lin Feng's gaze narrowed slightly. His eyes were as calm as deep pools, as if they contained endless emotions. He didn't respond. He just quietly gazed at everything in front of him. Jiang Xinyue's voice came from inside the room, calm as water. Sun Yan, the matter of marriage, I want to reconsider. She was tall, her skin was like snow, and her features were exquisite, just like a sculpture. However, there was no fluctuation on that face, and her tone was as calm as water, without a trace of emotion flowing out. The corners of Sun Yan's mouth rose slightly, his gaze full of confidence. It's good to think about it, but I'm sure I'll be able to impress you. His voice was gentle and carried an unquestionable firmness. Li Chueying hurriedly greeted her, her attitude extremely enthusiastic, almost with a hint of flattery. Sun Yan, come, Annie sends you off. Her tone was full of compliments and flattering, as if everything was under her control. As soon as they left, Jiang Xinyue turned back and tenderly reached out to take Xiner's hand. It's been hard for Xiner to take care of Dad today. However, her gaze fell on Xiner and she frowned when she saw that her clothes were dirty. Xiner, did you fight with someone again? How did you get it like this? Xiner revealed an innocent smile and jumped into her mother's arms, whispering, It's okay, Mom, I just fell a little. There was a bit of petulance in her words, and a hint of hidden stubbornness flickered in her eyes. Jiang Xinyue gently picked her up and gently kissed her on the forehead, then pushed the wheelchair into the room. Suddenly, Jiang Xinyue opened her mouth, her tone low and full of suppression. Lin Feng. There were only her and Lin Feng in the room at the moment, and the air seemed to freeze, the silence suffocating. If it wasn't for her next words, Lin Feng almost thought that she had realized that she had woken up. I'm sorry, I really can't hold on anymore. Her voice carried a hint of choking, her eyes filled with complex emotions, her gaze deep and sorrowful as she looked at Lin Feng. I know you can't hear or be conscious right now, but I always feel sorry for you if I don't tell you. She whispered, her voice full of helplessness and pain. Xiner was saved by you when you gave up your life, and now that she's grown up healthy, I want her to have a complete family and be able to live happily and carefree. If Sun Yan can take good care of her, I will marry him. At this point, her voice became shaky, and tears had unconsciously slipped down and overflowed her eyes. She leaned against Lin Feng's leg. Her face was filled with a complicated look. It seemed like guilt. It seemed like she couldn't let go, but it was even more helpless and confused. Her hand gently stroked Lin Feng's leg, as if it was the only comfort she could do. I am sorry for you, she murmured, sighing deeply, tears slipping silently down her face, before shaking her head and leaving the room. Just as she turned to leave, the bathroom door in the room suddenly opened silently, and a dripping wet teenage girl emerged from it, unashamedly naked. Lin Feng's brows frowned slightly, his gaze cold as a knife. Jiang Xinya, why was she in my room with Xinu? Jiang Xinya swept a glance at him unapologetically, a sneer appearing at the corner of her mouth, and said contemptuously, He's quite handsome, but it's a pity that he's become an invalid. Casually sprawled on the bed, she picked up her cell phone and answered it with a hint of provocation in her tone. Future brother-in-law, what can I do for you? Lin Feng held his breath and silently listened to the sound of the phone as Sun Yan's voice came from the other end of the line. As the conversation progressed, Lin Feng's eyes grew colder and colder, and the anger inside him surged like a tidal wave. Sun Yan is using all sorts of sweet words to draw Jiang Xinya in, while Jiang Xinya is on the phone, recklessly denigrating Lin Feng, with harsh words and no mercy. Sooner or later, my sister will be your person, but you even asked me to drug my sister. This is really troublesome if it's discovered. Jiang Xinya's tone was filled with disdain and hedonistic pleasure. Sun Yan was silent for a moment and finally agreed. Well then, let's make a deal. I've got my eye on a bag and a pair of shoes, which add up to more than 40,000 yuan, which shouldn't be a big deal for you. Good, then I'll go over now. Thank you, brother-in-law. Jiang Xinya's tone was relaxed, as if she was at peace with everything. Lin Feng listened quietly, the coldness under his eyes gradually deepening. Jiang Xinya was born beautiful, but her heart was more poisonous than a snake or scorpion. Her betrayal had already cut Lin Feng's heart like a knife. After she left, Lin Feng took a deep breath, his gaze sunk as deep as an abyss, and an icy determination surged up in his heart. If Xnu is genuinely interested in remarrying, I, Lin Feng, have absolutely no complaints, but if she's blinded by such despicable tactics, then I, for one, will definitely make them pay the price. Right at this moment, the window suddenly and silently pushed open, and a short-haired woman in a tight leather jacket with a diminutive figure appeared in front of Lin Feng and said coldly, "Supreme, you're awake." Lin Feng's gaze stared slightly, and he said in a deep voice, "Little Qing, why are you here?" Shouldn't you be guarding the borders? Xiao Qing's gaze was firm as she responded in a low voice. The border is certainly important, but you, Supreme Father, are even more important. Besides, no one has dared to violate the border since your unprecedented battle back then. Lin Feng's gaze sank slightly, his brows tightening as he asked, "Is there anything else to report?" Xiao Qing looked grim and whispered, "Supreme Father, you have been recuperating for the past 2 years. There are countless villains around you, and those who miss your wife also abound. My subordinates have not received orders and do not dare to act without authorization. I have come now to ask for your advice on whether or not these petty people can be exterminated in one fell swoop." The corners of Lin Feng's mouth rose slightly as he coldly said, "It seems that during the time I've been recuperating, some people have gotten stupid." His eyes were sharp and his words were cold. "Then start with this son. I want all his information." Xiao Qing did not hesitate and quickly responded, "Yes, my subordinate will immediately go and do it." As soon as the words left his mouth, Xiao Qing's figure silently disappeared outside the window like a ghost, dissolving into the dark night. Just then, Exiner's crisp voice came from outside the room. "Mom, Exiner has a big surprise to tell you." Jiang Xinhua happened to walk into the room. Exiner pulled her little hand, her face full of excitement, and stood in front of Lin Feng's wheelchair, her eyes glittering with anticipation. "Mommy, you said that when a prince kisses a sleeping princess, the princess wakes up, right?" Jiang Xinhua froze slightly, her complexion somewhat complicated. She then laughed softly and softened her tone. "That's a fairy tale. It doesn't really happen in reality." But Exiner didn't pay any attention to this. She stubbornly took her mother's hand, gathered her courage, and said expectantly, "Then if you kiss Daddy, Daddy will wake up." Jiang Xinhua immediately showed a shy face, although she knew that this was just a child's fantasy. But in the end, she couldn't argue with Exiner's insistence, and with a light sigh, she finally complied with her daughter's wishes. Even if Lin Feng was still a vegetable, even if he was still unresponsive at the moment, as a mother, for the sake of her daughter, she decided that it would not be too much to kiss him. She slowly bent down, her lips gently landing on Lin Feng's lips, warm breath spreading between the two of them. Even if Lin Feng had a firm heart, at this moment, his pupils couldn't help but contract slightly. Exiner, who was standing by the side, covered her eyes shyly and whispered, "Mommy really kissed Daddy, and when Daddy wakes up in a while, Mommy will be so happy that she'll jump up and down." However, Lin Feng did not wake up. Exiner raised her head and looked at her mother, her tone lost. "Look, Mommy kissed Daddy, but Daddy didn't wake up. How could this happen?" Exiner's eyes widened, unable to accept this cruel fact. She rushed forward to shake Lin Feng, her voice carrying a hint of choking. "Dad, wake up, please wake up." Jiang Xinhua's voice was as low as a knife. "Exiner, Daddy won't wake up. Mommy will find you a new daddy, okay?" These words were like a sharp blade, piercing into Exiner's heart. "No, I don't want to. Mommy is a liar. Mommy said she wouldn't find me a new daddy." Her voice was filled with despair and anger. At this moment, Exiner only felt that the entire world had collapsed. She desperately pulled on Lin Feng's hand, trying to pull him up from the wheelchair, her eyes full of eagerness and helplessness. But no matter how hard she tried, Lin Feng remained motionless, as if he had become a dead statue. Jiang Exinu watched this scene, her heart as painful as a knife. Her daughter longed for her father's company, while Lin Feng could never wake up again. She had known all this for a long time, but it was still hard to bear. "Daddy, wake up, and tell Mommy that you are better." Exiner's voice was low and broken, tears blurring her eyes. She cried out, the loss and despair in her eyes were overwhelming, but Lin Feng remained silent. His eyes were like a dead lake without the slightest fluctuation. His heart was filled with guilt, but at this moment he couldn't wake up. He had to reveal Sun Yan's true colors, wait for the best time, plan and move. This had always been his principle. Jiang Xinhua said in a low voice, her eyes filled with pain, "Exiner, perhaps in the future, Father will wake up, but for now, you also need a complete home." "No, I just want Daddy." "Daddy, why don't you say anything? You clearly said you would listen to Exiner. You're a liar too." Exiner shouted hysterically, the disappointment and anger in her heart intertwined into a darkness. She couldn't make sense of it all. She cried so hard that she couldn't catch her breath. Her tiny body trembled violently, and she continued to try to shake Lin Feng's body with her teeth and claws open. But in the end, she was still forcibly taken away by Jiang Xinhua and held tightly in her arms, unable to break free any longer. Not long after, Xaner finally got tired of crying. Her eyelids were heavy, and she gradually fell into a deep sleep. At this time, Jiang Xinya pulled her sister's hand, with an excited smile on her face, and urged, "Sister, hurry up and go. The dinner party is about to start. Today is your birthday." Jiang Xianyu was pulled out of the house by her with a somewhat heavy heart, but still forced a smile. Sun Yan hosted a banquet at the Jiangzhou Hotel to celebrate her birthday. Meanwhile, in Lin Feng's room, Xiaoqing once again appeared, holding a thick piece of information in her hands, and said in a cold voice, "Supreme Being, I've already collected the information on this Sun Yan. There is one more thing. Today is the birthday of the lady. Sun Yan is hosting a banquet at the Jiangzhou Hotel. The banquet will officially start in about 40 minutes. You have a look." Lin Feng received the information. His gaze was like ice, and after a moment of silence, he slightly sneered. After flipping through the information, he said in a low voice in mockery, "A small Sun family, the methods are so dirty." He closed the information, his eyes narrowed slightly, deep with danger. This birthday party is just the right time to unmask him. "Qing, help me prepare the Jiangzhou Hotel. I want to celebrate his birthday." The Jiangzhou Grand Hotel was the most luxurious hotel in the entire city, and Jiang Xinyue and Jiang Xinya had just walked up to the door when the welcoming lady greeted them respectfully and said with a smile, "Are the two of you Mr. Sun's reservation?" Jiang Xinya smiled and nodded her head, her face full of smiles. "Yes." The welcoming lady smiled respectfully. "The two of you are really lucky. Sun Shao specially booked the box. The box we have here is not something that can be booked casually. Inside, please." Before her words left her mouth, she suddenly stumbled, her complexion changing slightly, obviously startled. 15 minutes ago, the hotel was still crowded with people, but in a short period of time, the lobby had been redecorated with banners, balloons, and lights, and even the background music had been changed to a soft and romantic melody. Jiang Xinyue's heart trembled slightly. Her eyes wandered through the decorations and the atmosphere. Her heart was shaken. Could it be that all this was really carefully arranged by Sun Yan? Sun Yan stood by the side. A hint of surprise flashed in his eyes and whispered to himself, "I obviously only booked a private room. I didn't realize that my father would actually be so considerate as to pack the entire hotel." At this time, elegant music slowly played. Flower petals fell from the sky, and the lighting was soft, as if a dreamy atmosphere had been specially formulated. A girl in angelic attire slowly walked towards Jiang Xianyu, holding an exquisite gift box in her hands. The gift box was gently opened, and inside was a diamond ring the size of a pigeon's egg, shining brightly. "Xianyu, marry me." Sun Yan looked at her imploringly, kneeling on one knee and holding the diamond ring in his hand, his face full of confidence and anticipation. He was secretly ecstatic. His father's arrangements were really well thought out. How could Jiang Xinyue refuse such a big diamond ring? Jiang Xianyu's body trembled slightly as her heart began to shake. She had been married to Lin Feng for 6 years and had never received any birthday gifts. Except for Xaner, she had almost nothing. She longed to be pampered and spoiled like any other woman, and all this, Lin Feng couldn't give, but Sun Yan did. In the shadows in the distance, Lin Feng stood silently, quietly gazing at everything in front of him, his eyes deep, as if a pool of stagnant water. "Xianyu," he whispered to himself, "will you say yes to him?" Sun Yan smiled in anticipation of her response. "Xianyu, what do you say?" "Sun Yan, this is too sudden," Jiang Xinyue said softly with some hesitation. "It's better to let me think about it again." Jiang Xinya, however, was impatient, pulling her sister's arm, her eyes full of anticipation. "Sister, what are you still thinking about? Isn't Sun Yan better than that vegetable? If Lin Feng never wakes up, who will take care of him?" Sun Yan froze. The smile on his face instantly froze, and a trace of disbelief flashed in his eyes. He stood up violently, his face instantly grimacing as his emotions suddenly erupted. He roared angrily, "Jiang Xinyue, don't be ungrateful. I've chartered the entire Jiangzhou Hotel for you and promised to take care of that drag queen. What are you still hesitating for?" Jiang Xinya hurriedly also came up and persuaded. "Sister, agree to it. There aren't many people who can pack the Jiangzhou Hotel. I've been eyeing some bags and shoes for a long time, just waiting for Sun to pay." Sun Yan had completely lost his confidence just now, and the scowl on his face caused a chill to rise in Jiang Xianyu's heart. She finally couldn't help herself and spoke coldly. "Sun Yan, you've had enough. My daughter is not a procrastinator. Just based on your words, I won't agree to you either. A hint of viciousness flashed in Sun Yan's eyes, the corners of his mouth slowly hooked up, his tone cold. Jiang Xinyu, do you think you have a choice? Without the Sun family's support, within 3 days, the Jiang family will completely disappear. Jiang Xinyu's heart sank violently, as if a huge stone was pressed against her chest. An unprecedented sense of oppression made it difficult for her to catch her breath. She spoke in a hard voice. Sun Yan, are you threatening me? No, no, no. How could I possibly threaten you? A smug smile surfaced on Sun Yan's face, his tone relaxed. I'm just stating a fact. As long as you are obedient, the Jiang family will not only be able to come back from the dead, but will even be able to rise to the next level. You're shameless. Jiang Xinyue's face was white, her anger causing her body to tremble slightly. She understood at this moment that the man in front of her did not treat her as a human being at all. However, she could do nothing in the face of his coercion. In the corner, Lin Feng stood quietly, his eyes like cold blades. In addition to the heartache for Jiang Xinyue, it was anger and murderous intent rolling around in the bottom of his heart. Right at this moment, Sun Yan suddenly raised his hand and laughed loudly. Everyone, today is this young man's big day. All consumption. I, Sun Yan, will pay for it. As soon as the words fell, the whole scene immediately boiled over. Thank you, Mr. Sun. Mr. Sun is a great man. Mr. Sun's atmosphere. Listening to the flattery from all around, Sun Yan's eyes glittered with complacency, and his entire person became more and more inflated. The corners of his mouth hooked up, and his right hand quietly reached for Jiang Xinyue's slender waist, ready to embrace her. However, just as he was about to touch her, a strong hand violently stopped him. Sun Yan was stunned and froze for a few seconds, then turned his head angrily, only to see that it was a short-haired beauty who had stopped him. Sun Yan's eyes instantly lit up. His anger was swept away and replaced by a hint of desire to conquer. He smiled recklessly and teased. What? I'm embracing my fiancée and you're jealous? How about this young master embraces you as well? Saying that, he reached out to touch Xiaoqing's face. In the next second, the sound of a crisp slap resonated throughout the room. Sun Yan froze, sitting on the ground, covering his beaten face, shock and disbelief filling his tone. How fucking dare you hit me? Xiaoqing's gaze was cold and expressionless as she looked at him, her voice indifferent. This is already mercy. If you speak out of turn again, I will not spare you. Sun Yan was so angry that he went on a rampage and said in irritation. Damn it, looking for death. What are you all waiting for? All of you get on me. I'll be responsible if you kill him. A few of his men came back to their senses and surrounded them viciously. Dealing with a woman is just a matter of hand-to-hand combat. However, Xiaoqing didn't even raise her eyelids and just waved her hand casually. The next moment, several muffled grunts rang out one after another. The men who had surrounded him fell to the ground in unison, clutching their stomachs and wailing in agony, apparently having been easily knocked out. Sun Yan's entire body froze, incredulously looking at what was in front of him, his gaze filled with astonishment. His voice trembled as he pointed at Xiaoqing. You, who are you? I am the heir of the Sun family. This is my Sun family's field. Xiaoqing smiled coldly with disdain in his eyes. The Sun family of the district is nothing more than ants. After saying that, she turned around and bent down slightly towards Jiang Xinyue, her tone respectful. Happy birthday, ma'am. Jiang Xinyue froze and looked at her with a puzzled face. You know me? Just then, there was a sudden cry of alarm. Under the lights on the stage in the hall, the side of a man's face appeared faintly. Although it was only a profile, it portrayed a well-defined, resolute, and sunny temperament that made people stare in disbelief. Jiang Xinyue's heart shook violently, her gaze fixed on that side face. Pondering for a moment, she suddenly blurted out, Lin Feng? Next to her, Xiaoqing immediately whispered, Madam, the one on the stage is my family's lord. Do not talk nonsense. Even though she was reminding, she secretly marveled in her heart. She really deserved to be a madam, and even recognized the supreme lord at a glance. However, Sun Yan's face had completely changed, so angry that he was almost ready to explode. Who the hell is this? Don't you know that I've chartered the hotel? Manager, get the fuck out of here. The hotel attendant, cold and sweaty, whispered something over the intercom. Soon, the hotel manager rushed in with several security guards. Sun Yan hooked up the corners of his mouth and let out a cold smile. What are you guys still standing there for? Hurry up and arrest the person who hit me. This little bitch dares to make a move later on. I'll see how she obediently leaves herself at my mercy." As he said that, the corner of his mouth licked as he stared greedily at Xiao Qing, the desire in his eyes almost overflowing. "Give it to me. Today this young master must teach her a lesson." However, before Sun Yan had a chance to react, he was quickly held up by two security guards, completely immobilized. Sun Yan struggled, burning with rage. "What are you doing?" "I am the young master of the Sun family. The entire hotel is underwritten by me. Is this how you treat your gold master? I'm going to file a complaint against you." Sun Yan's face was as gloomy as water. The manager just gave him a cold look and asked in a cold tone, "May I ask your name?" Sun Yan froze for a moment, then became furious and roared, "Are you fucking blind? I am the young master of the Sun family. Sun Yan." He glared at the manager, his eyes filled with killing intent, itching to tear the other party into pieces. However, the manager only gave a demented laugh, a hint of disdain flashing in his eyes. "I think you've misunderstood. The big shot who bagged our hotel's surname is Lin, not Sunday." "What did you say?" Sun Yan froze, his entire body completely frozen in disbelief as he looked at the manager. But at the very next moment, something even more shocking to Sun Yan happened. The hotel manager actually walked quickly to Xiao Qing, bowed his head respectfully, and his tone was full of apologies. "Respected VIP, I'm really sorry for such a thing. You see, how are these people to be dealt with?" Xiao Qing waved her hand expressionlessly. "Throw them all out, don't spoil the ladies' fun." Yes, yes, yes. The manager agreed without hesitation, immediately giving a wink to the security guard. Sun Yan's face instantly changed drastically, and before he had time to struggle, several security guards violently picked him up and dragged him directly out of the door. The hotel manager finally breathed a sigh of relief, wiped the cold sweat on his forehead, and murmured in a low voice, "Damn, I almost offended that lord. With that lord, the Sun family is nothing." Immediately, his complexion turned cold, and he commanded in a deep voice, "Order down in the future. As long as it's someone from the Sun family, Jiangzhou Grand Hotel will not welcome them." Right at this moment, a melodious piano sound rang out in the hall, the pleasant melody flowing like water waves, causing the entire scene to turn from noisy to tranquil. Jiang Xinyue was intoxicated by this wonderful melody, staring blankly at the center of the stage, a trace of doubt rising vaguely in her heart. This melody, surprisingly, was so familiar that it made her heart tremble slightly. Her gaze locked onto the man playing the piano, and she murmured softly, "Lin Feng, is it really not you?" Soon after the song ended, the man on the stage slowly got up and then quietly left until his back had completely disappeared. As if awakening from a dream, the crowd, unable to return to their senses for a long time, whispered, "This song should only be found in heaven, and it is rare to hear it on earth." Suddenly, the silence was broken by a cry of alarm. "Look, you guys!" Jiang Xianyue followed the crowd's gaze and saw bright fireworks blooming in the night sky outside the Jiangzhou Hotel, the dazzling light illuminating almost the entire city. In the midst of the fireworks, a few large words slowly emerged. "Xianyue, happy birthday." At that moment, the whole city seemed to light up for her, and everyone was struck by this spectacular scene. Jiang Xinya excitedly pulled Jiang Xinyue's hand. "Sister, look, it's so romantic. Such a unique and luxurious way of celebrating a birthday. It makes almost everyone so envious that they can't open their eyes." Jiang Xianyue stared blankly at the night sky. A strong thought suddenly rose in her heart. Without saying a word, she turned around and ran towards the VIP hall. She had a feeling that all of this was done by Lin Feng. She didn't want to leave any regrets. She wanted to personally seek proof. However, when she pushed open the door of the VIP room, the glimmer of hope that she had clutched on her face instantly vanished into thin air. The large VIP room was empty, except for a piano, which was placed alone in the center of the room. Her heart sank and she murmured and whispered, "Is it really not you? But whether it is or not, why did you leave?" Jiang Xinyue's mood was confused, and all the memories of 5 years ago in her mind surged like a tidal wave, making her heart feel as if it was being gripped tightly. Seeing this, Jiang Xinya skimmed her mouth and sneered disdainfully. "Sister, you're too naive. That cripple is still lying at home. How could he come here?" Hearing this, a glimmer of hope flashed in Jiang Xianyue's eyes. "Yes, she's going home. Lin Feng definitely hasn't arrived home yet. I must go and make sure. Xianya, let's go home. Lin Feng definitely hasn't arrived home yet. Meanwhile, Lin Feng had long returned to the Zhang family. He stood in front of the window and gazed deeply into the night sky, then instructed in a low voice. Shao Qing, go down first and organize the recent developments of the Zhang family and give them to me. Shao Qing was about to say something, but finally nodded and turned to leave. In her opinion, the Supreme Being had his own reasons for doing things, and she didn't need to ask about them. After seeing Shao Qing leave, Lin Feng changed into loose clothes and sat back in the wheelchair, resuming that vegetative appearance. Now is not the time, he whispered to himself, his gaze deep. Once the news of my awakening is announced, not only will Zhangzhou change, I'm afraid that the people in the capital city will also be unable to sit still. Meanwhile, Zhang Xinyue had rushed home in a flurry of wind and fire. Go straight to Lin Feng's room. However, the moment she pushed open the door to her room, her body froze. The hopes of the heart were dashed in an instant. In the room, Lin Feng was still sitting quietly in his wheelchair, his eyes closed tightly, in an unconscious manner. In an instant, it was as if she had fallen from heaven to the bottom of the valley, with all kinds of heartache and helplessness welling up in her heart, and the tears could no longer be controlled and slid down her cheeks. Lin Feng, do you know? She choked, slowly squatting in front of him, her voice with a hint of trembling. 5 years ago, my family forced me to marry Sun Yan, and I resented him. It so happened that my grandfather asked me to marry you, and when I heard that you were a general, I agreed, but one night later, you suddenly disappeared. But it brought Shiner into my life, unexpectedly, but I'm really happy. Later, Xiner became seriously ill and needed a bone marrow transplant. You suddenly appeared, and when the doctors said there was not enough bone marrow, you insisted that they continue to pump it until Xiner was saved. At that time, I was really touched, but Xiner survived and you became a vegetable. Lin Feng, I really can't hold on any longer. She looked at Lin Feng with tearful eyes, her voice choked. Please wake up, okay? At this moment, her heart ached to the extreme, tears slipping down like broken beads. She slowly raised her head. Her pearly appearance was so beautiful that it broke people's hearts. Lin Feng looked at her, his heart turned over a torrent of emotions, how he wanted to hold her and tell her that he would not let her suffer in the future. However, he couldn't. Right at this moment, Zhang Xinya pushed the door in and said with a face full of excitement, Sister, accompany me to the Love Edge bar, okay? Zhang Xinyue looked at the time and shook her head no. It's too late. Gee sis, just for a little while, as a distraction. It turned out that just now, Sun Yan's phone call came, demanding that Zhang Xinyue be taken out no matter what. Zhang Xinya repeatedly begged. Zhang Xinyue really couldn't argue, so she agreed. All right, I'll accompany you, but I'll go and do some makeup first. Seeing that her sister did not suspect anything, Zhang Xinya was relieved. She coldly swept a glance at Lin Feng, the corner of her mouth hooked up with a touch of mockery. Haha, a waste is a waste, no surprises. Tomorrow my sister is going to divorce you. Lin Feng's gaze steeply chilled, anger churning in the bottom of his eyes. At the same time, the door to the private room of the Love Edge bar was gently pushed open, revealing 2 beautiful figures. As soon as Zhang Xinyue appeared, everyone in the private room suddenly brightened up. Especially Sun Yan, his eyes were full of blazing heat and his mouth almost watered. Xinu, you're here. Sun Yan couldn't wait to greet him, with a fawning smile on his face. Zhang Xinyue frowned, her gaze falling on Zhang Xinya, her tone icy. Did you team up with Sun Yan and deliberately trick me into coming here? Zhang Xinya pursed her lips, not knowing how to explain for a moment. Sun Yan hurriedly came forward to relieve herself. Xinu, don't be angry. I asked her to call you out. What I said today was indeed excessive, so I wanted to apologize to you. Seeing Zhang Xinyue's lack of reaction, Sun Yan continued to persuade. Xinyue, I was too impulsive today, will you forgive me? Zhang Xinu sighed helplessly in her heart. She knew very well that if the Zhang family wanted to get through this difficult time, they would have to rely on the Sun family after all. So she spoke. It's nothing, when people are angry they will inevitably make some irrational moves, I understand. Upon hearing this, Sun Yan instantly smiled. As long as Xinu forgives me, I promise there will never be a next time. The corners of his mouth held a smile, but in his heart, he had already been impatient, and his mouth said good words. But it is still not going to fall into bed. When the time comes, see how I will clean you up. He poured a glass of wine. Sneak a pill into a cup when you are not looking. Smiling, he handed the wine cup to Jiang Xinyue. Xinyue, I'll toast you with this cup of wine as an apology. Jiang Xanyu shook her head, her tone indifferent. I accept the apology, but drinking is exempt. I have to drive later. Sister, just drink it. Jiang Xinyue had a disinterested look on her face. Look at Sun Xiao's look. If you don't drink, he must think you haven't forgiven him. Big deal, I'll call a chauffeur for you in a while. Sun Yan also squinted and laughed. Yes, Xanyu, just one glass of wine. Jiang Xinyue felt a pang of weakness and her heart softened slightly. But she eventually took the wine cup and drank it down without hesitation. Seeing that she drank it down successfully, Sun Yan could no longer hide the joy on his face, revealing a smug smile. As expected, it wasn't long before Jiang Xinyue's head became heavier and heavier. Sleepiness gradually set in, and her consciousness became blurred. She knew that in this state, it would only get harder and harder for her to stay any longer. She just wanted to call out to Jiang Xinyue, but just as she stood up, her body suddenly went limp and she almost fell to the ground. Sun Yan was secretly delighted in his heart and took the opportunity to hold her up. His tone was gentle but with a hint of triumph. Let Xinyue play for a while longer. I'll send you back. After saying that, he didn't hesitate to pick up Jiang Xinyue and directly took her out of the bar. Sun Yan carried the delirious Jiang Xinyue straight to a hotel instead of her home. Sun Yan, where is this place? What did you bring me here for? I want to go home. Jiang Xanyu still maintained a trace of consciousness despite drinking the ecstasy. She struggled to leave, but her body was so weak that she couldn't even stand. Xanyu, you're really drunk. Sun Yan laughed in a low voice. What can I do here at the hotel? You clearly know, and you're still asking me this silly question. Looking at Jiang Xanyu's weak appearance, the blazing heat and greed in Sun Yan's eyes couldn't be concealed, and the disguise on his face was finally completely torn apart, revealing his original nature. I've slept with so many women, but I haven't touched a superb one like you yet. Jiang Xinyue's face suddenly changed, finally realizing that she had fallen into a trap that she could not escape. Sun Yan, you're shameless, she shouted angrily, pushing him away as hard as she could. But her body was completely disobedient. Oh, I didn't expect that the medicine hadn't fully kicked in yet, and you actually still have so much strength. Sun Yan sneered. The more you resist, the more excited I get. His smile grew more licentious as he reached out, ready to rip her clothes off. Stop it, asshole. Jiang Xanyu shouted in desperation. Her head was groggy, but Jiang Xinyue still desperately tried to get up from the bed. Her limbs were weak, and there was nowhere to run. Haha, escape? This place is full of my people. Where can you escape to? Sun Yan's mockery echoed in the room. He forcibly pressed her to the bed, a hideous smile on his lips. Let go of me. Jiang Xinyue struggled with all her might, but she still couldn't get rid of his iron-like grip. Sun Yan's hand pressed down on her with deadly force. The possessiveness in his eyes grew stronger and stronger, and he ripped open the corner of Jiang Xinyue's coat, exposing her snow-white shoulders to the air, making him even more unscrupulous. Jiang Xinyue's heart completely sank into despair, and tears could not help but well up in her eyes. She exerted all her strength and bit down hard on Sun Yan's ear. Sun Yan roared furiously in pain and cursed angrily. You're fucking looking for death. With a face full of grimace, he grabbed Jiang Xinyue's hair with a vicious force. I'm telling you, it's the blessing of your life to be my Sun Yan's woman. Don't be so fucking ungrateful, he said through gritted teeth. Just when Jiang Xinyue was at the end of her rope, a loud bang suddenly exploded, and the door of the hotel room was kicked open. Sun Yan was so shocked that he almost didn't go soft, and turned his head violently, looking at the intimidating figure and cursed loudly and angrily. Who the hell are you? Don't you know the rules of knocking on the door? Sun Yan turned his head violently and was about to swear, but the moment he saw the person coming, his face changed instantly. Lin Feng, it's you? However, in the next second, before he had time to react, Lin Feng had already slammed his fist on his face, swiftly and precisely, directly knocking Sun Yan to the ground. At this moment, Lin Feng didn't have the slightest bit of restraint at all. The whole person was like a god of killing descending. An icy cold aura emanated out from his body overwhelmingly. The temperature of the room seemed to drop instantly, and the air became depressing and condensed. Sun Yan sat paralyzed on the ground, looking at Lin Feng in horror, his eyes filled with bewilderment and fear, as if he had finally realized that he had fallen into an irretrievable abyss. He gritted his teeth and roared. Okay, I get it, you're all ganging up on me, playing fairy tale, right? Lin Feng coldly spat out 3 words as if they carried frost. Are you worthy? Sun Yan was furious and shouted at the top of his voice. Everyone outside, come in. Kill him. Lin Feng swept his eyes across the doorway and said indifferently, Do you think someone will still come to save you? Sun Yan smiled disdainfully. Who are you scaring? Can you, a cripple, go to heaven? Lin Feng's eyes were as sharp as razor blades as he stared coldly at Sun Yan. In your entire life, you probably won't have the chance to do this kind of foolishness again. Sun Yan raised his head and was about to scream again, but Lin Feng suddenly took a step forward. His aura was overpowering, his gaze was like a knife. Sun Yan just wanted to dodge, but it was already too late. Lin Feng fiercely struck out, deadlocked Sun Yan's right hand and said in a cold voice, You touched Xinu with this hand, didn't you? Before Sun Yan could react, the next moment, intense pain spread along his arm like an electric current, and he screamed miserably, realizing with horror that his right hand had been pinched into a twisted shape by Lin Feng, unable to move. Ah, fuck you. Do you know who I am? I'm the heir of the Sun family in Jiangzhou. If you dare to touch me, my father won't let you go. Sun Yan's head was covered in cold sweat from the pain, and his eyes were filled with madness and anger. He struggled frantically, trying to get out of Lin Feng's control, but Lin Feng's force was like iron, and he didn't budge at all. Lin Feng's right foot kicked out violently, hitting Sun Yan's knee straight. With a click, the sound of crisp bone cracking immediately rang out, followed by Sun Yan's heavy kneeling on the ground. The knee of his right leg had been crushed, and the pain almost caused him to lose consciousness. So what about the Sun family? Lin Feng towered over him, his eyes cold, his look disdainful. If the Sun family dares to intervene, they will directly be destroyed together. Looking at the dazed Zhang Xenu in his arms, an unprecedented wave of self-blame and heartache surged in Lin Feng's heart. His hands trembled slightly, and his gaze gazed at her in a complicated manner, as if he wanted to carve her appearance into his heart and remember it forever. Jiang Xinyue's voice was weak, her feeble breath barely able to support her words, but she still tried to open her mouth, a hint of pleading in her tone. Are you? Not Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't reply. A flash of deep emotion flashed in his eyes. He lowered his head and tenderly put on her outerwear, whispering, Don't talk, it will soon be fine. After saying this, Lin Feng turned around and walked towards Sun Yan with a firm pace. Jiang Xinyue was drained, barely lifting her head, her voice weak and urgent, she reminded. Murder is punishable by jail. Lin Feng didn't respond, but Sun Yan, as if he had grabbed the last straw, shouted at the top of his lungs. Do you hear me? You can't kill me. Killing someone is punishable by imprisonment. Lin Feng finally stopped, his cold gaze stabbing at him like an ice blade, his tone calm but full of threats. That's right, killing someone does require imprisonment. He turned his words around, the corner of his mouth hooked into a cold smile. But you're not even a human being in my eyes, you're just a piece of livestock. This sentence was like a heavy blow, completely shattering Sun Yan's last shred of psychological defense. His face instantly turned pale, his body trembled violently, and he backed up repeatedly, his voice trembling. I don't want to die, please let me go. Of course, I won't let you die so quickly. Lin Feng said coldly. I still have a use for keeping your life, but a death sentence can be waived, but a life sentence is hard to escape. The hope in the bottom of Sun Yan's eyes was instantly extinguished, and he stared at Lin Feng in horror, his voice trembling and full of fear. What do you mean? It doesn't mean anything. Lin Feng sneered in a low voice. It's just to make you remember. After Lin Feng, whose tone was so cold, finished speaking, he raised his right foot high, and without hesitation, he ruthlessly fell towards Sun Yan's lower body. Sun Yan's eyes flashed with terror, his pupils suddenly dilated, wanting to dodge, but it was already too late. Accompanied by a muffled sound, Sun Yan instantly screamed in pain, covering his crotch and rolling on the ground. Blood quickly soaked the ground. The pain made him almost lose his mind. This is just a small lesson. Lin Feng laughed coldly. Remember, I'll keep your life for now, and when it's useless one day, I'll send you back to the West. Lin Feng gave him a disdainful look and turned towards Jiang Xinyue. Jiang Xinyue was already delirious. If he hadn't arrived in time, I'm afraid that her delicate body would have long been defiled by this beast. Lin Feng's heart violently stung. Guilt filled his heart. He gently kissed Jiang Xinyue's forehead and murmured in a low voice. Crescent Moon, all these years you've suffered. He wanted to pick her up and take her home, but in the end he held back. Now was not the time for him to show himself, and if he exposed his identity rashly, he was afraid that it would cause unnecessary trouble. He took a deep breath and controlled his inner fluctuations. After instructing Xiao Qing to take care of Jiang Xanyu, Lin Feng quietly returned to the Jiang family. When she returned to her room, under the dim light, there was a small figure lying beside her bed. Xaner woke up in the middle of the night and realized that her mother hadn't come home and her father had disappeared. Her heart was filled with uneasiness, so she guarded the edge of the bed alone, silently praying that they would return safely. The little girl obviously couldn't hold out any longer and fell asleep on the side of the bed without realizing it. Lin Feng's heart warmed, and he was about to carry her to bed when suddenly Xaner opened her hazy eyes. As soon as she saw Lin Feng, her eyes reddened and she hugged his neck tightly, suddenly bawling. "Daddy, you've disappeared. Xaner waited for you all night. Xaner is afraid that she'll never see Daddy again." Looking at his daughter crying so sadly, Lin Feng's heart was like a knife, and he hurriedly took her in his arms and comforted her softly. "Dad went to pick up Mom and take her home. It's fine. Everything is fine." Xaner hugged Lin Feng tightly, her little face full of anxiety and unease. "Where's Mommy? Is Mommy back?" Lin Feng smiled and pinched her little face, softly comforting. "Xaner, don't be anxious. Mom is already on her way back." He paused, his gaze becoming serious. "By the way, the matter of Dad waking up, must not tell anyone, not even Mom." Xaner nodded obediently, her eyes filled with innocence and determination. "Well, Xaner will keep it a secret, really." Sheener clenched her small fists and said seriously, "Then we'll pull the hook." At this time, on the other side, Sun Yen was rushed to the hospital, his face pale, as if even the last glimmer of hope was fading. In an almost hoarse voice, he asked, "Is it really hopeless?" The doctor was silent for a moment and shook his head as if pronouncing his death sentence. "No, I will arrange for an operation immediately. Your situation is very serious, and I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to even survive without a resection. If you don't have it removed, Sun Xiao, I'm afraid your life will be in danger. Now that the lower part of you is wrapped in dead skin, it's useless to keep it." Sun Yan's expression twisted, painfully gritted his teeth, his voice trembled. "No. Not cut, okay." His face was written with collapse and unwillingness. "I am the young master of the Sun family. My family has a lot of money. I am in the prime of my life. How can I become a wastrel?" He gritted his teeth and growled lowly. "Lin Feng, I'm going to cut off the flesh of your body piece by piece." Piece by piece. Meanwhile, Jiang Xinyu woke up leisurely in her stupor. In a daze, she opened her eyes, and what came into her eyes was Xaner's cute little face. Xaner blinked her eyes and said mischievously, "Mommy is a big piggy. Xaner is up and Mommy isn't shy. Jiang Xinyu froze slightly and sat up with a slight effort, rubbing her temples as her mind recalled last night's events. In a daze, it was as if she really saw Lin Feng's face, that familiar silhouette, that scent that made her heart feel safe. She was vaguely expecting in her heart that the man who saved her and gave her a sense of security, was it really Lin Feng? However, when she looked up and saw the man beside the bed, he was still sitting quietly, his eyes empty and senseless. Jiang Xinyue's heart sank violently, and tears of disappointment quietly slipped down. She murmured in a low voice, "Maybe. I thought too much. That person, it's not you at all." At this time, Li Chueying pushed the door in, her face somber, her eyes sharply scanning the room. She questioned in an unfavorable tone, "Who the hell drugged you yesterday?" She was obviously furious to the extreme, seeing that Jiang Xanyu and Sun Yan's marriage was about to take shape. But then this happened. It was simply a public slap in her face. Jiang Xinya, who was standing on the side, was like a quail, trying to minimize her presence for fear of being implicated. Jiang Xinyue hugged Xaner, her eyes filled with anger and disgust as she gritted her teeth and said, "It's Sun Yen. He's the one who asked me out yesterday and even drugged the wine." When Li Chueying heard this, she was furious and snorted coldly. "Okay, I'll go and settle the score with him now." But just halfway through her words, Li Chueying's voice stopped violently, as if stuck. The whole person instantly froze, and the angry look on her face gradually became suspicious. "Who are you talking about?" "Sun Yen, it can't be Sun Xiao, right?" Jiang Xinyue looked at her coldly, her tone icy, words like knives. "It's him." Li Chueying froze for a moment, her expression complex, as if weighing something. Jiang Xinya, who was at the side, sensed her mother's hesitation and hurriedly persuaded her in a low voice. Sister, are you misunderstanding? You were going to marry Sun Shao. There is absolutely no need for him to do this kind of thing. You can't be that you don't want to marry Sun Shao, so you deliberately slander him in front of Mom, right? Upon hearing this, Li Chueying's brows furrowed and her face turned sour. XNU, don't be confused. It's a blessing for you that Sun Shao has taken a liking to you. Don't lie and cheat me just for your own selfishness. Jiang Xinyu sniffed, and a chill ran through her heart. She looked at her mother, her eyes filled with disappointment and pain. Her mother, surprisingly, chose to believe Sun Yan over herself in the first place. Right at this moment, Li Chueying's cell phone suddenly rang. She glanced at the name on the screen, her face instantly changed drastically, her fingers trembled, and she hurriedly picked up the phone. Sun Yan's furious roar came from the other end of the phone. Let that bitch Jiang Xinyu come to Sun's house to look for me right now. If I can't see her today, I'll sell your whole family to a nightclub. Do you understand? As soon as the words fell, the phone was hung up directly. Li Chueying froze for a moment, her face turned pale with a brush, and her entire body completely panicked. She raised her head violently, not caring about anything else, and eagerly looked at Jiang Xinyu, her tone urgent. Xinyu, you now hurry to go to the Sun family to make amends to Sun Shao. Jiang Xinyu also chimed in. Sister, go now, don't make it difficult for Mom. Looking at her mother's expression, Jiang Xianyu's heart sank to the bottom, her eyes filled with bitterness. In her mother's heart, Sun Yan, her son-in-law, was even more important than herself, her daughter. She closed her eyes and let out a long breath, followed by 2 lines of clear tears slipping down quietly, her tone indifferent. Okay, I'll go. In the corner of the room, Lin Feng was expressionless, but the icy killing intent in his eyes was quietly condensing. He didn't say anything, but the chill in the air already said it all. Watching the crowd leave, XNR gently pulled Lin Feng's sleeve, tilting her little head and looking at him with big fluttering eyes. Daddy, why don't you let Mommy know that you've gotten better? Mommy is being scolded by Grandma again, so poor. Lin Feng didn't maintain his vegetative state anymore, but gently stroked his daughter's head, his gaze cold. I heard the conversation outside clearly. Sun Yan, I've already warned him once, but this guy, he still doesn't know how to die. Since that's the case, it's not my fault. He paused and whispered, XNR, push Daddy to the park, okay? Daddy will go and fight the bad guys, and after teaching the bad guys a lesson, Mommy won't be scolded by Grandma. XNR's eyes instantly lit up with anticipation. Really? Lin Feng smiled and nodded. However, this matter, too, is a secret between XNR and Father O. Meanwhile, Sun Yan had already been taken back to the Sun family to recuperate. A middle-aged man with a majestic face stood in front of the hospital bed, his gaze cold, clearly not satisfied with the situation at hand. On the side, an exquisitely dressed noblewoman cried her eyes out, her face full of heartache. She only has this one son, and now that he has become like this, how can she not be heartbroken? The man snorted coldly, his face grim to the extreme. What's the point of crying? What can you salvage by crying? Look at the good son you've spoiled, the young master of the Sun family, actually being wasted like this, disgracing the face of the Sun family. Sun Yan's face was full of unwillingness, and his voice was hoarse as he shouted. Dad, they set me up! The man snarled, his gaze full of hateful anger. So you're jumping into the pit? The noblewoman on the side said cautiously. Master, we can't blame it all on Yenner. I don't think that Jiang Xinyu is a simple woman, and I'm worried that their target will be our Sun family's company. The man smiled disdainfully, contempt in his eyes. Just by her a small Jiang family? What if there is someone behind the Jiang family? The noblewoman's words caused the man to look puzzled, his brows slightly furrowed. Even if there is someone behind the Jiang family, is the Sun family still afraid of them? Big deal. Arrest that woman and ask for clarification. As soon as Sun Yan on the bed heard this, he instantly became excited. Dad, and that Lin Feng, he's been a vegetable for so many years. How can he just wake up when he says he will? I think they just have bad intentions. When we catch him, I'm going to chop off his arms and legs. Let him also taste what it's like to be a eunuch. The man's gaze flickered, contemplating for a moment, and he did not speak immediately, but his eyes grew colder and colder, clearly having plans. Just then, with a bang, the door of the room was kicked open, and the 3 people in the room jolted and looked at the door in alarm. Only to see a man striding in, his face expressionless, and carrying a man covered in blood in his hand. It was the captain of the Sun family's bodyguards, who had fainted to death at the moment, and the blood dripped onto the floor, stinging and icy cold. This horrifying scene frightened the noblewoman, and hastened to hide behind the man, her face pale. And the man also wrinkled his eyebrows, although still maintaining composure, but the heart is vaguely a little scared. "Who are you, and what do you want from my Sun family?" The man's gaze was stern, and his tone was hostile. Sun Yan stared at Lin Feng dead in the face, his eyes filled with terror. Then he roared violently, "Lin Feng! He's Lin Feng!" Lin Feng ignored his rant. His tone was indifferent to the extreme as he looked condescendingly at the crowd, his voice piercing the bones like the blade of a cold winter's knife. Making Star Moon apologize at the door, "You guys are worthy of it too." Sun Li spoke coldly, "You're Lin Feng? First you beat up my son, and now you dare to barge into my Sun family to spread your wildness. You really don't have a lot of guts." Before his words left his mouth, he angrily rebuked, "Men, take him down for me." However, Lin Feng remained expressionless, letting Sun Li roar angrily there with disdain in his eyes. "None of your people can get up right now. Do you want me to give you some more time and call more people over? Kid, do you know what happens when you offend my Sun family?" A hint of viciousness flashed in Sun Li's eyes, staring at Lin Feng like a jackal. "Now kowtow to me and apologize, and cut off your own limbs, and I can consider saving your life." The corners of Lin Feng's mouth flickered as his figure flickered, and instantly arrived in front of Sun Li. "Downfall? This is the downfall." As Lin Feng's words fell, a crisp slap rang out, and Sun Li didn't even have time to react before he was slapped to the ground by Lin Feng. The woman next to him screamed in terror. But as soon as Lin Feng's gaze swept over her, she immediately covered her mouth, fearing that she would also end up in the same situation as Sun Li. Sun Li seemed to be completely enraged, his eyes shooting towards Lin Feng like sharp blades. "Kid, I don't care who the person behind you is, you're dead." Lin Feng's gaze was cold, not caring about Sun Li's threat, as if he was looking at a ridiculous livestock. "You're even more stupid than your punk son." Before the words fell, Lin Feng single-handedly grabbed Sun Li's neck and lifted him up alive. Sun Li desperately struggled, but Lin Feng's hand was locked like an iron clamp, and the strong sense of suffocation made him almost roll his eyes. "No, don't kill me, please." Sun Li struggled to spit out a few words from his throat. The woman couldn't stand to look at it anymore, and she directly knelt down in front of Lin Feng. Sun Yan cried out in pain, "Lin Feng, please let my father go, and what happened between us will be written off, and I promise that I will never pester Jiang Xnu again." Lin Feng sneered and let go of his hand. "There are many ways to kill someone. I won't choose the stupidest one." Sun Li fell heavily to the ground, gasping for breath and keeping his head down, not even having the courage to look at Lin Feng. Lin Feng stood bent over, condescending, his tone cold. "First thing, you are limited to apologizing to Xnu with sincerity within today. If you don't get her forgiveness, there's no need for the Sun family to exist." Lin Feng raised his second finger and added in a cold voice, "Secondly, you're not allowed to reveal my existence, otherwise trust me, you'll die a horrible death." After saying that, Lin Feng left the Sun family. When Lin Feng completely disappeared, the woman carefully helped Sun Li up. Sun Li had a malicious face, the hatred in his eyes almost overflowing. "Lin Feng, just wait, I will make the Jiang family disappear completely." Just as he was about to pick up the phone, his cell phone suddenly rang, and seeing that it was the group manager calling, Sun Li didn't hesitate to pick up the phone. "Mr. Sun, something big has happened, we're finished." The manager's anxious voice came from the other end of the phone. Sun Li responded angrily, "You're the one who's fucking finished, you've taken the wrong medicine, haven't you?" However, the manager almost cried out, "Mr. Sun, it's really a big deal. All the investors have withdrawn their capital, the banks have stopped lending, the stock has dropped, we're going to go bankrupt tomorrow at the latest." Sun Li was so shocked that his cell phone slipped to the ground. He looked stupefied. "No way, how can I be broke? I have hundreds of millions of dollars." Sun Yan carefully asked, "Dad, what should we do now?" He was afraid that Sun Li would overreact again. Sun Li snapped back to his senses and murmured incredulously, "Could it be Lin Feng?" Although he couldn't believe it, the only explanation he could think of at the moment was Lin Feng. In just 10 minutes, he was able to bankrupt the Sun Group. Who else could do it but Lin Feng? "Quickly, go to the Jiang family and bring all the funds to apologize to Jiang Xinhua. It must be quick." Sun Li stared menacingly at Sun Yan, his tone icy. "If you can't get her forgiveness, dead." In front of the Jiang family's door, Li Chuiying uneasily urged, No matter what the Sun family asks for, you must agree, and only by calming the anger of Sun Shao will our family be safe. Jiang Xinyue's face was expressionless. The tear tracks on her face looked particularly sad. Mom, I know. Just open the door. Li Chueying saw a person kneeling in front of the door. The person is covered with bandages, pale, body slightly trembling. Looks like it has been kneeling for a long time. Li Chueying froze, almost unable to believe her eyes. Kneeling at the door was actually Sun Yan. Li Chueying rushed forward and tried to help Sun Yan up. Young Sun, what's wrong with you? Sun Yan, however, pushed her away. He then kowtowed fiercely to Jiang Xinyue. Xinyu, I was wrong about yesterday. Please forgive me, I'm a beast scum, not worthy of you at all. Please forgive me once. Jiang Xinyu frowned at the wolfish-faced Sun Yan, her heart very complicated. Could it be that this person really had a clear conscience? Or is there another plot brewing? After yesterday's incident, Jiang Xinyu was already completely afraid of Sun Yan, but she knew that it was a matter of life and death for the Sun family. Sun Yan's face was full of pleading. Please, Xinyu, forgive me, okay? Jiang Xinyu looked at his reddened forehead. Her heart was a little shaken, and she finally whispered, It's fine to forgive you, but I hope you won't disturb my life in the future. Sun Yan instantly revealed an expression of ecstasy and hastily nodded his head. Don't worry, I promise that I will absolutely not pester you in the future, and as long as there is a place where you appear, I will take a detour. Saying that, she took out a check from her pocket. Here's 1.3 million. It's not much, but it's some compensation I'm giving you, and last night's incident is written off. Li Chueying immediately grabbed the check, her eyes glowing. Young Sun, you're really too polite. How can this be a good thing? Jiang Xinyue sighed helplessly. Go away. I don't want to see you again. Yes, I'll leave now. Sun Yan was like an amnesty. He couldn't even wipe off his cold sweat and left in a sorry state. However, just after turning the corner, he bumped into the returning Lin Feng and Lin Yusin. At this moment, Lin Feng was sitting in a wheelchair, his eyes empty. Despite this, Sun Yan couldn't help but stiffen up, as if he was a criminal waiting to be sentenced. Mr. Lin, I've done everything you said, and Miss Zhang has accepted my apology. I wonder what else you have to say. Lin Feng's tone was indifferent. I hope this is the last time. If my news is known, there's no need for the Sun family to exist. When Sun Yan felt the terrifying aura emanating from Lin Feng, his legs softened and he directly fell to his knees, almost gasping for air. At that moment, the door to the Zhang family home slowly closed. Li Chueying asked Jiang Xinyue uneasily, Girl, quickly tell me, do you know any big shots? You hurry up and divorce that loser. Don't not think of yourself, at least think of your daughter. The door was suddenly pushed open with a creak, revealing the cute face of the little girl Sheener. Jiang Xinyue asked dully, Xener, when did you go out? Xener smiled brightly. I'll push Daddy out into the sun. Jiang Xener looked at her daughter. Her heart instantly brightened, squatting down to take Xener into her arms. My Xener really understands things. Li Chueying looked at the harmonious family of three, skimmed her lips, and turned away with the check. After walking a few steps, Xener suddenly came to Jiang Xinyue's ear and whispered, Mommy is the bad guy that Daddy helped you fight. Oh, but this is Xener and Daddy's secret. Xener can't tell Mommy. Xener asked expectantly, Today is Monday. Xener is going to kindergarten, Daddy. Do you think Xener looks good? Even though Lin Feng didn't respond, Xener wasn't disappointed and still happily followed Jiang Xinyue out the door. Mother and daughter had just walked out the door when Xiaoqing's figure suddenly surfaced behind Lin Feng. Push me out and follow them. Lin Feng smiled with the corners of his mouth. I'm going to send Xener to school. Along the way, Jiang Xener looked at her daughter's bouncing appearance, and a smile appeared on her face. Just as they were about to arrive at the school, an explosive shout suddenly came from behind them, and when they turned their heads to look, two big fat men and a small fat man were coming aggressively, and it was none other than Zhou Xiaohu's family. Jiang Xener immediately protected her daughter and frowned at the three. What do you want? Zhou Xiaohu's father, with a bruised and swollen pig's head face, showed his teeth and looked at Jiang Xinyue. It's this little bastard's father. That's your vegetative husband who beat him up. Don't want to leave today unless you give an explanation. Zhou Xiaohu's mother was full of ferocity. Medical expenses, moral damages, without 200,000 yuan. It's not over. Jiang Xener glanced at Zhou Xiaohu. The grease stains at the corners of his mouth and his rounded little tummy. Anger surged up in his heart. he stepped forward without any fear and said in a cold voice, "First of all, my daughter isn't a bastard, and second of all, Lin Feng is still sitting in a wheelchair right now. You guys have to make a draft for your lies too." Her eyes became ice cold. "I'm warning you guys, if you dare to bully my daughter again, I'm not done with you." Zhou Xiaohu's father angrily stepped forward, shook his fist and threatened, "Damn little bitch, believe it or not I'll kill you. Bad people don't bully my mom." Lin Yusin clenched her small fists, her big eyes glaring angrily at Zhou Xiaohu's family. "Otherwise I'll let daddy beat you up." As soon as he heard these words, Zhou Xiaohu's father's body trembled. A trace of fear crossed his eyes, and in his heart, he remembered Lin Feng's tactics that day, and only felt chills all over his body, and his heart was filled with fear. "Little bitch and you little bastard, we'll see." Putting down a sentence, Zhou Xiaohu's father turned around with his wife and son and left, as if he was afraid that Lin Feng would suddenly appear. Unbeknownst to them, Lin Feng was watching them, and a hint of murderous intent flashed through Xiaoqing's eyes. "Supreme, do you want me to follow them and teach them a lesson?" Lin Feng narrowed his eyes and gently shook his head. "No, there will be a chance. Now go to the kindergarten." Tianhai Kindergarten was one of the best kindergartens in the city, and Jiang Xinyue had spent a lot of effort to send her daughter here in order for her to receive the best education. Jiang Xinyue personally dropped her daughter off at her class, and was about to head back to the office when she was stopped head-on by a man. "Ms. Jiang, don't be in a hurry to leave. There's something I want to talk to you about." Jiang Xinyue froze. The naked eyes of the man in front of her made her feel very uncomfortable. "Director Yang, is there something wrong?" The man in front of him was none other than Yang Tianyang, the director of the Tianhai Kindergarten's enrollment office. Yang Tian smiled. "Miss Jiang, don't be in a hurry. You can go to my office and talk slowly." Jiang Xinyue frowned, but still agreed. In the director's office, Yang Tian recklessly surveyed Jiang Xinyue. "Ms. Jiang, your daughter's course will end soon this year, right? What are your plans for next year?" Hearing this, Jiang Xinyue frowned. "Director Yang, didn't I book it for 2 years in the first place? It's only been half a year now. Are you trying to back out?" Yang Tian smiled blandly and pushed the glasses on the bridge of his nose. "Ms. Jiang, you're a bit confused. The park has a limited number of slots and has to be reallocated every year." Jiang Xinyue gritted her teeth. Her heart was a bit anxious. "Director Yang, I can give you 50,000 alone." Yang Tian was not flustered, leaning on the back of the seat with a smug smile on his face. "Ms. Jiang, this meal can be eaten indiscriminately, but the words can't be said indiscriminately. Your 50,000 is not for me. It's just your prepaid tuition." Jiang Xinyue was so angry that her face turned red. "How could you?" Seeing her like this, a trace of contempt flashed in Yang Tian's eyes. "Ms. Jiang, don't be anxious. I can help you think of a way." Yang Tian smiled faintly and put up 2 fingers. "Let's do it this way. I'll give you 2 choices. First, give me $1 million and I'll help you buy a spot from another parent. $1 million? Jiang Xinyue's eyes widened. Yang Tian's appetite was too big. Yang Tian looked at the embarrassed Jiang Xinyue with a smile on his face. "But this doesn't count my introduction fee." Jiang Xinyue's sullen face directly showdown. "I do not have so much money. What is the second way?" "The second method is even simpler." Yang Tian rubbed his hands, his eyes full of fire. "Ms. Jiang, as a beautiful woman, and I heard that her husband is still a vegetable, there's no need for me to make it clear, right? As long as you are willing, it doesn't matter if I help you out with this $1 million. Jiang Xinyue was so angry that her face turned white and she was trembling. Jiang Xinyue looked at Yang Tian's face full of lewd expressions. How could she not know what he was thinking? Nasty and shameless, disgusting. Seeing this, Yang Tian's face instantly changed. "Ms. Jiang, I'm giving you a chance. Or else do you think that with your condition, your daughter can enter the door of this kindergarten? Don't you give your face away." Jiang Xinyue dabbed up, her face full of disgust. "No need. There are so many kindergartens in Binhai City. It's not like you're the only one I can choose from. With scum like you existing in Haitian kindergarten, I still feel uneasy about my daughter staying here." After saying that, she turned around and was about to leave. "Stop!" Yang Tian let out a cold shout, his face suddenly cold. "The nature is still quite strong. I would like to see, without me loosening my lips, who dares to accept your daughter in the entire Binhai City. Tomorrow at the latest, I'll make sure you come back and beg me on your knees." Inside the kindergarten, Xiaoqing pushed Lin Feng around, and after some inspection, he was still satisfied with the kindergarten. Suddenly, Qing frowned, and her footsteps came to an abrupt halt. Lin Feng followed her gaze, only to see Jiang Xinyue angrily running out of the office building, full of anger and aggravation. Looking at Lin Feng's heart stung. Lin Feng's gaze was cold and deep. "Wait here, I'll go up and take a look." Yang Tian's office, at this moment, Yang Tian's office also welcomed two uninvited guests. "Director Yang, how are you doing?" Only a man and a woman pushed the door in. It turned out to be Mr. and Mrs. Zhou. Yang Tian was a bit surprised. "Mr. Zhou, Mrs. Zhou, what brings you here?" As soon as Zhou sat down, he opened his mouth with a face full of displeasure. "Yang Tian, how did you become the director of the enrollment office? What kind of cats and dogs are all recruited to the school? Isn't this pulling down the grade of Haitian kindergarten? What does Mr. Zhou mean by this? Which little mongrel has messed with you by being ungrateful? I'll fire him right here." Yang Tian frowned. In his heart, he secretly said that Zhou sends him a lot of money every year. He has to serve him well. Wang Lian opened his mouth first, his face hideous, the corner of his mouth raised to the sky. Who else could there be? It's that little bastard Lin Yusin, a little bastard born of a stinky bitch. How can she get into Haitian kindergarten? Zhou coldly grunted. "You don't have to worry about this. Once this semester is over, he won't be eligible to enter this kindergarten." "No way." Wang Lian was furious. "I paid so much money just for my son to get into your school. How can I stay with a wild seed? Big deal. I'll pay another $1 million. I'll expel him now." Speaking of Lin Feng, Wang Lian's eyes flashed with an uncontrollable anger. Thinking of what he did, I can't bear it for a moment. When Yang Tian heard this, he laughed. "Old brother Zhou, that's out of line. Wait, I'll do him right now." Just then, the office door was kicked open. Bang! The sound startled all three. "Who is it? Don't you know how to knock before you enter?" "Scared me a bit." Yang Tian directly cursed, thinking it was one of his subordinates who didn't know the rules. However, as soon as they looked up and realized that it was a stranger, Zhou and Wang Lian were so shocked that they directly collapsed to the ground. "Lin Feng, why are you here?" Before the words were finished, Lin Feng's slap had arrived first. A crisp sound resounded, and Zhou's 200-plus-pound body flew out directly. "Murder!" Wang Lian was so scared that she turned pale and screamed loudly. The sudden scene startled Yang Tian, and he hurriedly tried to stop it. "Stop it! This is a school, what are you doing? If you say one more word, I'll cut out your tongue." Lin Feng's voice was like an ice-cold blade. Yang Tian's body instantly froze. The words hardened at the edge of his mouth, and he swallowed hard. The moment he locked eyes with Lin Feng, it was as if he had seen an abyss. Lin Feng took a step towards Zhou. "Still want to beat my wife? There's no need for your hands to exist anymore." Zhou had not yet recovered from the severe pain. He heard 2 clicks. His hands were crushed by Lin Feng. After collecting Zhou, Lin Feng turned his head to look at Wang Lian. "Punt!" Without waiting for Lin Feng to speak, Wang Lian directly knelt down towards him, a handful of snot and tears. "Lin Feng, we were wrong. We definitely won't dare in the future. Please let us off once." Wang Lian was really scared now. Lin Feng had his hands behind his back and looked at him expressionlessly. "Get out of Binhai City within today or suffer the consequences." Yes, we're leaving." The office suddenly fell into dead silence. Lin Feng sat on the sofa, his face expressionless. "I'll give you a chance to explain clearly why you're targeting my daughter." Yang Tian sneered. "Lin Yusin? So you're that vegetable husband of Jiang Xinu." His gaze was contemptuous and his tone arrogant. "I, Yang Tian, don't need reasons to do things. You won't let her enroll in school? Even if you kill her, what can you do?" He looked at Lin Feng with contempt. "A mere trash. Dare to act like a big brother in front of him? Unless your wife kneels down and begs me to stay with me for one night, your daughter will never be able to get into Haitian kindergarten." Lin Feng laughed coldly, anger rising rapidly in his heart as he slowly spat out 4 words. "Don't know how to die." As soon as his words fell, he stood up violently and kicked a flying kick, heavily kicking Yang Tian in the chest. Bang! Yang Tian fell to the ground in a sorry state, his face twisted. "You actually dare to hit me." He struggled to get up and spat out a mouthful of blood, his gaze filled with resentment. "Just you wait, I'm going to chop off your hand." With that, he pulled out his cell phone and prepared to make a call. However, before the call was dialed, the office door was pushed open. The kindergarten director hurriedly walked in, and Yang Tian immediately cried, "Director, you have to judge me, this madman." Words did not finish, the director roared. Yang Tian, you bastard. Who gave you the right to use your power for personal gain? How dare you insult Mr. Lin's wife? Yang Tian froze, an ominous premonition instantly rising in his heart. From now on, you are expelled. The director's voice was angry and majestic. It's not just Haitian kindergarten. As long as I live, there will be no place for you in Binhai City. Yang Tian was instantly paralyzed, his face pale, his eyes full of despair. How can... He finally realized that the Lin Feng in front of him was definitely not something he could mess with. The head gardener was furious and gritted his teeth. Hurry up and apologize to Mr. Lin. It's really bad luck to run into a son of a bitch like you. Yang Tian rolled and crawled on his knees in front of Lin Feng, his forehead knocked with blood. Mr. Lin, I was wrong. I deserve to die. I beg you to spare me. I have an old man and a young man. Please spare me. Lin Feng looked calm and his tone was icy. Don't you think you're rich and powerful and can manipulate other people's destinies? He looked down at Yang Tian. From today onwards, I'm going to make sure that you have money you can't spend, have a home you can't go back to, and be reduced to a beggar forever, and your death won't be painful. Yang Tian's face was pale, and there was only fear in his eyes. The head of the gardener was covered in cold sweat and hurriedly stated, "This kind of black sheep deserves retribution. Mr. Lin, don't worry. Your daughter will definitely get the best education." Lin Feng nodded slightly. "It's best if that's the case. Today's matter will not be repeated, and you mustn't divulge half a word about me." Yes. Don't worry, Mr. Lin." The head gardener bent over, his face full of tension. Lin Feng didn't say any more, carried his hands behind his back, and left in large strides. Inside the office, everyone let out a sigh of relief, as if they had just escaped from the jaws of death. The head of the kindergarten was sweating all over, and he was almost in a state of collapse. Luckily, the mayor's call came in time, otherwise I would have lost my life. Meanwhile, Zhang Xinyue walked out of Haitian kindergarten and walked aimlessly down the street alone. She kept her head down, her eyes full of fatigue and helplessness. She couldn't help but ask herself, why does all the misfortune come to me? As she was lost in her own thoughts, she suddenly heard a familiar voice. "Sister, why are you here? Weren't you going to the office?" She looked up and saw Zhang Xinyue standing not far away, her face full of concern. Zhang Xinyue shook her head and sighed, telling Zhang Xinyue everything that had happened at the kindergarten. After listening, Zhang Xinyue's face immediately changed. "They just look down on us because we have no money and no status. If your marriage to Sun Shao had gone through, they would have been fawning all over us." Zhang Xinyue's face turned cold and her tone was resolute. "Don't mention the Sun family to me. From today onwards, I have no relationship with them." Zhang Xinyue saw that she was a little angry, so she quickly changed the subject. "By the way, Mom said that a mysterious person is chasing you. Why don't you ask him for a favor?" Zhang Xinyue smiled bitterly. "Don't listen to Mom's nonsense. I haven't even seen that person's face. He might just have helped me out of the blue." Okay, take your time figuring it out." Zhang Xinyue shrugged, clearly losing interest in the topic, and turned around, saying, "I've got a date to go shopping. I'll be going now." Zhang Xinyue let out a soft sigh, watching Zhang Xinyue leave. She was in a low mood, and it seemed that even the hustle and bustle of the entire street had drifted away from her. Just as she was about to continue walking, her phone suddenly rang. She frowned and saw that it was an unfamiliar number. After hesitating for a moment, she finally pressed the answer button. In the upscale coffee shop, Zhang Xinyue sat down in her seat, and in front of her was Sun Yan, who looked pale. She frowned at him and asked with concern, "Sun Shao, what's wrong with you? Are you sick?" Sun Yan snorted, his tone extremely unpleasant. "If you have something to say, just say it, don't bullshit me." Zhang Xinyue was taken aback by his attitude and pouted in exasperation. "I'm just trying to warn you kindly. My sister is very popular right now, and if you don't work hard, I'm afraid you won't have a chance." Sun Yan's eyes instantly became cold and sinister. "Zhang Xinyue, are you trying to get me killed?" Zhang Xinyue was puzzled and stunned. "Sun Shao, I really want to help you. You are the best candidate for my sister-in-law." Sun Yan sneered, and a dark and unclear emotion flashed in his eyes. Then I really should thank you." He surveyed Zhang Xinyue, his gaze lingering for a moment on her shapely figure. Suddenly, a sense of regret welled up in his heart. Why was I so obsessed at the beginning, and why did I have to fight Zhang Xinyue to the death? He suddenly felt as if he had suddenly gained some enlightenment, thinking, If I had set my sights on Jiang Xinya earlier, I might have succeeded long ago. He subconsciously covered his waist, and the vague pain was still clear. Jiang Xinya sensed the unusual look in Sun Yan's eyes, and her whole body trembled. She quickly stood up and said, "Since Sun Shao has given up, I don't want to waste my efforts. Goodbye." She quickly left without looking back, her mood complex, with a sense of resignation and disappointment. Sun Yan looked at Jiang Xinya's disappearing back, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He took out his phone, looked up a number, and dialed without hesitation. When the call connected, Sun Yan's mouth curled up slightly, and a cold gleam flashed in his eyes. "I have a good job for you. Don't worry, it's definitely a good job." On the street, Jiang Xinya walked aimlessly, her mood heavy. Her mind kept echoing Sun Yan's words, and she felt a sense of loss. "I never thought Sun Yan would really give up," she thought to herself with a self-deprecating smile, looking down at the street below her and sighing silently. It seems that designer bags and shoes are completely out of the question. However, she hadn't walked for long when two men suddenly appeared in front of her, blocking her path. "Hey girl, you're quite pretty. Do you want to have some fun with us?" One of the men grinned lewdly, his eyes raking over Jiang Xinya uninhibitedly, his tone obscene. The two men were dressed like thugs, their faces full of levity and disgust, their eyes wandering wantonly, and the words that came out of their mouths were even more chilling. Jiang Xinya's heart tightened, and she took a panicked step back. Her voice trembled slightly as she asked, "What do you want?" One of the men licked the corner of his mouth and grinned coldly. Hey, what do you think we want?" "Of course we want to do something that will make you feel good." Jiang Xinya's face instantly paled, and the emotion of fear almost instantly took over her entire body. She subconsciously wanted to run, but her legs felt like they were nailed to the ground and she couldn't move at all. Just then, Lin Feng and Xiaoqing happened to pass by the corner and saw this scene. Xiaoqing whispered, "Supreme, do you want to save her?" Lin Feng, with his hands behind his back, looked cold and indifferent. "Save her, but she needs to learn a lesson. After all, she is also a member of the Xinyue family." In the dim alley, Jiang Xinya was cornered. Tears glistened in her eyes, and her voice became almost weak. "Please let me go." She struggled desperately, but her feeble resistance was no match for the two men in front of her. One of the men sneered, reaching out and grabbing her by the collar. "Let you go? That would be a big loss. Sun Shao gave us this job, which is both profitable and fun. We can't waste this God-given opportunity." "Sun Shao." Jiang Xinya's body trembled, her mind went blank, and she felt a blackness before her eyes. "Sun Yan? Isn't he the person I helped? Why is he doing this?" While her thoughts were in a state of chaos, Jiang Xinya felt a sudden weight on her shoulders. The next second, she was pushed hard against the wall, and she was suddenly unable to move. The painful pressure made her almost unable to breathe. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and Jiang Xinya closed her eyes in despair. It seemed that all her strength had been drained at this moment. "Scream, the louder you scream, the more excited we brothers will be." One of the men gave a disgusting smile and spoke provocatively. However, the unexpected happened. Jiang Xinya cautiously opened her eyes and saw that the two thugs in front of her had already collapsed to the ground, their lives unknown. She froze, unable to react at all. Her gaze turned to the front, where a cold-looking woman stood. Jiang Xinya was still in shock, her voice trembling. "Did you save me?" Xiaoqing looked at her coldly, her eyes showing no warmth. "My lord asked me to pass on a message. In the future, don't interfere in anything to do with your sister. Otherwise, the next time I come, I won't be the one to save you." "My lord? My sister?" Jiang Xinya's head was in a complete mess. Before she could ask anything, Xiaoqing had already turned and left, disappearing from her sight. She stood there in a daze, tugging at her torn clothes, and stumbled out of the alley. But in her mind, she saw the image of that night, when she had helped her sister climb into Sun Yan's bed. Was her sister feeling the same despair then? Tears welled up in her eyes again, and she muttered, "Sister, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." At this moment, Xiaoqing had returned to Lin Feng's side, and a cold look flashed in her eyes. "Supreme, the matter has been taken care of." Lin Feng's mouth curled up into a faint sneer, his eyes cold. "I hope she learns her lesson this time." Xiaoqing nodded slightly, then her expression became solemn, and her tone became serious. "Supreme, the Binhai banquet is in 10 days, and some people can't hold back anymore. Will you be attending?" Lin Feng's expression remained calm, and his voice was cold. No need to go. That temple is too small to hold me. In the study of the Sun family, Sun Yan was furious. Waste, all of you are waste. The pain of being cut off from the root of his descendants caused a subtle change in Sun Yan's character, and the whole person exuded a sense of viciousness and madness. He snickered, a wicked gleam in his eyes. The Jiang family, don't think this is the end. The best is yet to come. After saying this, he picked up his phone and dialed a number. His tone became unusually flattering. Mr. Liu, this is Sunday. As soon as the call was connected, he immediately switched to a flattering tone full of flattery. I have 2 good products. Are you interested in learning more? Later, in the Jiang family living room, Jiang Xinyue stood in front of Sun Yan with a cold expression on her face, and her tone was unfriendly. Mr. Sun, we agreed that we would not interfere with each other's affairs, and that you would not pester me. Sun Yan was dressed in a sharp suit, his face was a sickly pale, and the feminine aura in his eyes was uncomfortable. But on the surface he remained polite. Xinyue, you've misunderstood. I just feel that I haven't compensated you enough. Compensation? Jiang Xinyue frowned, looking at him warily, and a feeling of unease rose in her heart. Li Chuiying, on the other hand, beamed. Mr. Sun, you're too polite. Sun Yan waved his hand quickly, as if impatient. It's only right. By the way, have you heard of the Binhai banquet? Binhai banquet? Jiang Xinyue didn't react much, but Li Chuiying was full of excitement. Sun Shao, can you take us in? Sun Yan's eyes flashed with brilliance, and then he shook his head and said, Even our Sun family is not eligible, let alone taking you in. Sun Yan suddenly changed the subject. But I can introduce you to a friend of mine, maybe it will work. Jiang Xinyue refused outright, not wanting to get involved with the Sun family anymore. No, I'm not interested in this kind of thing. She got up and was about to leave. Xinyue, wait a minute. Li Chuiying grabbed her by the arm. Sun Shao is just being nice, just making friends. He's not asking you to do anything. Just then, a sweet voice sounded from behind them. Mom, I've pushed Dad out to get some sun. Everyone turned around and saw Lin Yusin slowly walking towards them, pushing Lin Feng in a wheelchair. Sun Yan's pupils contracted violently when he saw Lin Feng. He felt like he had been struck by lightning, his face pale, and he was instantly overcome by an uncontrollable sense of fear. Sun Yan forced down the fear in his heart and forced a smile. I've finished talking. It's up to you to decide what to do. With that, he quickly left the Jiang family, as if he were running for his life. Jiang Xinyue suddenly broke the silence by speaking up. Mom, Grandpa called yesterday and asked me to go back to the main family today. Li Chuiying froze for a moment and frowned. What did the old man want with you? Could it be because of the Binhai banquet? But what's the point of letting you go back? Jiang Xinyue shook her head. I don't know either. But I'd better go back as soon as possible.